Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Ask the Experts Q&A. And the title is, What can SMEs do to win more attenders? So I hope you're ready for this one, guys. We are here to take the questions to try and add some value across the course of the next hour or so. There's lots and lots of folk on the webinar already, and more joining all the time. It's a really big attendance, really big turnout. Thank you very much for coming along, and hopefully we can add some value and answer the questions that you need to be answered to turn some of those losses into wins when you're bidding in the public sector. So that's what we're here to do. No questions are off limits. Obviously, we did set it up to be specifically around what challenges and issues our SMEs having. But if there are any blue chips that have sneaked on the call, we won't throw you off. It's okay, guys. We know we all need a little bit of guidance from time to time, so don't worry about it. But we will be focusing on how to help SMEs to win more tenders, obviously specifically within the public sector, and primarily focusing on stuff that's happening within the UK. So I will do a very quick introduction. My name is Andrew Watson. I'm the bid consultancy and training manager here at Practice Tenders Direct. I've had the pleasure of being enrolled for a little bit over 5 years and have been doing bidding for several years in different forms and formats before that, and basically living and breathing, helping through our training and consulting support organizations to be as successful as possible when they are putting in bids. So I try and oversee what we do here and make sure we help as many of our clients as deeply as we possibly can. Alistair, how are we doing? Alistair's just back from holiday, everyone, guys. This is the first thing. He's come back from a week in a camper van, and now he's here and he's doing a webinar for us lovely folk. Isn't that what a start? Alistair, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alistair. I'm the bid manager in Andrew's training and consultancy team, and I'm just pleased to be back with some running water. I've had a shower this morning, slept in a bed. It's the little things that really build up. I've done the North Coast 500 round the top of Scotland. Lovely, brilliant, but happy to be back in my chair.
I was a little bit concerned, folks, in terms of just to make sure he got back safe, but he has done. And talk about a little bit of a hard landing coming straight back into a massively attended webinar. But I know he's always up for the challenge. So let's get cracking. The format, guys, is going to be Q&A. So there are into the hundreds of folk on the call on the webinar, but please do punch in your questions, anything you really want to be answered through the chat function, and I'll be picking them up, and hopefully tech skills dependent, I will be punching them into the slides that we're viewing so we can actually start to do some review and answer some live questions. So get those digits typing away, and we will get into answering some of those live questions. Your questions can be on anything relating to bidding, about how to be more successful, about any bits of information you think are any barriers, any blockers, anything that you need to be as successful as possible. While you're getting your fingers warmed up, getting it punched in, getting those questions fired across to us, what we can do is look at a few of the questions, and there were literally hundreds of them that were asked when you signed up and registered for the webinar. So we can spin on, show some of those on the screens. Again, if the tech is with me, looks like it maybe is, thankfully. And we'll just pick out some of the questions. We'll talk through these. What I tried to do here was basically pick out questions where there was quite a large number of questions, basically asking the same thing in different ways. So we'll try and do it where we're covering quite a lot of the need across the group of folks that are on the call today. So the first kind of topic area that came up that we can dive into, that there are a lot of questions on, and it's a really good one because it's really important. It's going to become increasingly more important, is around the sort of social value piece. So there are lots of variations, Alistair, on the question of how, as an SME, as a relatively small entity, do I compete versus bigger, more established, big departmental companies when I'm looking at responding to tenders relating to the social value offering that I'm putting across. So how as a SME, how do we compete in terms of our social value scores versus bigger companies as an SME? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's an insightful question, and it's certainly an area that's gaining traction under the new legislation. We'll all be aware that social value can now take up to 10% of the marking of any public sector procurement opportunity. Typically, it's taken from the pricing as well. So we see more a lean towards qualitative responses and how your company, communicates your service and your solution design. So how can you compete against the big guys? Again, there's no real shortcut for hard work on this one. I think is probably important to say. And the first point that I would be saying is research. Do your research on the specific client, on the area and the community that you're hoping to start operating in. Okay, so it's important for me just to probably lay some background to this, that tier one blue chip and incumbents don't win work simply because they are tier one blue chip or incumbents. Okay, no one should. No one wins work by virtue of who they are or what they've done before. It helps, but it doesn't directly translate into a further award of works. Okay, these firms win works because they have a better understanding of the nature of the project, either by delivering it for 4 years as the incumbent or by having the resources to research this, okay? And they can present this information in their tender responses. So if you want to compete with these guys, get yourself up to that level, research, find out what's going on in the local area, and find out how targeted social value can help with genuine problems that are being experienced in that area. Okay, so it's not firing from the hip, it's not a blanket approach, it's finding out any indices of multiple deprivation, it's finding out any health, social inequalities, and a lack of educational attainment. This will change. And I think I've said before in a social value webinar that what's appropriate in Glasgow might not be appropriate in London or even Aberdeen. We've got different problems, so they need to be solved in different ways. So you need to match the energy of these blue chip contractors by educating yourselves and your teams on the local area, local need, and again, any points of deprivation. Once you've researched an area, this area of your social value response, you should be operating at the same level as the big guys. Second point to this would be specific, okay? Spell it out to the buyer. So if you're going to advertise jobs locally as part of your social value contribution, detail which agencies you're going to partner with. Okay, now in Glasgow, is it the job centre on Duke Street? Let's get into this sort of detail. Is it through Indeed with preferential treatment provided to specific postcodes? Okay, talk about the search parameters and how you're using these tools and online resources. If you're supporting a community group, a food bank, detail which one and who you have spoken to at the group. Make it real, okay? Use evidence, use these facts to show we have had a conversation with these groups. This is the direction that we would like to take the social value, and these are the steps that we have taken to make this a reality, okay? It's great to say that we will support local food banks and this is what we'll do. The step ahead of that is saying, these are the food banks that we're going to support and we've already spoken to them, okay? So just, add a bit of authority and a bit of legitimacy to what you're saying. I guess as well, something that I've had a bit of an issue with, which I've learned, is don't leave any of this to the buyer's decision. Okay, I've written before that we will defer to the judgment of client to guide our response in this area, or we would be delighted to collaborate with your teams to find out where the support could be best directed. No, they don't want that. I've had so much feedback on that. Just don't do it. Tell them what you're going to do. And then it can come out in the wash. You can have a conversation about it pre-commencement or during the delivery of the contract. You can maybe change or add to or augment your social value delivery, but be specific, research the local area and tell the buyer what you're going to do. Take lead and drive your own decisions and ideas through the process. I would say would be a good starting point.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alistair. Excellent. guys, the question function, like I say, is open. There's been just a couple of questions coming. I don't know if I put people off by saying there were lots of folk, so many folk on the webinar, but do punch in your questions. I will look through them and try and get them. So do continue to punch them in using the questions function across the platform. Just while we're there, I'll pick up and say, I suppose the only other thing I was going to mention in terms of the social value piece was around, if you do have, kind of emphasizing the kind of local piece. So if there's a point where, as a smaller company, you're more like intimately linked with the geography, with the location, as opposed to a big company that's coming from further afield or that's more national. You leverage that to your advantage. Talk about your local insights, your local knowledge, and how you're going to support locally. So really, you can play up the fact that you're sort of smaller and more local can also help you in terms of social value scoring. Just moving on then, one of the areas that came up with quite a lot was around what is the best way to assess whether a tender is worth bidding on. So basically, there are lots of questions around this to understand, what is, how should I go through a process of establishing whether or not to pursue an opportunity. So organizations, and I work with lots of organizations that want to spend or do spend quite a lot of time on their qualification process, and it's really, really important to kind of nail this, because there is this piece around, if you make any errors like earlier in the process, those are going to be kind of magnified as you go through. So if you bid for something that really you never should have bid for, you're going to spend days or potentially weeks of work preparing a submission for something that really you shouldn't have done, maybe you're not eligible for, or you've got a very low probability of winning. So it really is important to try and have a robust process in place for determining whether tenders are worth bidding on. I know a lot of organizations get very excited about particular tenders, and they'll say things like, this is a brilliant opportunity for us. This would be awesome. We would love to do this work. Okay, but that in itself is not enough of a reason to pursue an opportunity. You have to remember what you're trying to do is to establish whether or not you're great for the buyer, not whether the contract's just great for you. So it's a little bit more to it than that. What I would propose is to always have a little bit of a formal process in place. So what I would suggest would be to have some sort of metric, a go, no go matrix that you're actually going to be using. So are there set questions that you should be asking yourself, very like low level questions you should be asking yourself for each and every opportunity to establish how good a fit the opportunity is for you? Do we meet all the specification requirements? Do we know that we have competitive advantages against likely competitors? Do we meet them, all of the minimum requirements? Are we able to meet the commercial envelope? Do we have a robust solution that is highly aligned to what the client requirements are? Things like that. Really sort of get into, really break it down. Do we have a previous relationship with the client, etc. So really simple questions we ask, and then we can get a more objective picture of, okay, we're able to answer a lot of yeses to these questions. That's leading towards this being a more of a good fit opportunity versus, okay, we're having to answer a lot of no's to these. That's not as good a fit opportunity. Like I say, it's not enough to just really want to do it. You have to be able to demonstrate why you're a really good fit, that it fits strategically, etc., etc. So what you don't want to do is just get excited and run with particular opportunities because they look good. You want to have that kind of list that you can adjust over time, where you're objectively capturing the reasons why you're pursuing an opportunity. That's easier then to have a more structured discussion around, depending on whether it's going to be one person or whether it's going to be a group of people who make that final decision about pursuit. This type of thing. And it also stands as a reference point for looking back and going, okay, well, did we pursue this opportunity for the right reasons? I think it's worth stating that it tends to often, we can't just make a one-time decision about whether we're going to pursue an opportunity. There's going to be various gates that we've got to pass through for for going all the way through to actually submitting it. So for example, do we know at the very early stages whether or not it's commercially viable to pursue it? Do we have enough time to work that aspect out before actually starting to think about our response? Or are we going to have to do those two in tandem and run the risk of actually creating responses, working on a submission that we're never actually be able to submit because it might not meet the financial envelope? And I've worked in both situations where that type of thing has to be made a decision about, because, for example, you've got to do quite a complex solution design, and that only once you've done that can you then understand what the commercials will exactly look like to then know whether you can fit within the commercial envelope. So there can be lots of difficult moving parts around this, but really trying to think kind of logically, rationally, capture those reasons, and then you can obviously refer back to them and say, okay, well, did the reasons give us a good fit here? Do we need to adjust the questions we're asking for future? Okay. Is the project strategically aligned with our goals as an organization, might be one, for example, or can we work with the margins that are available, etc. So the idea is that you're going to have a list of questions, a process to run through those with the correct decision makers, and then you're going to try and reflect and refine that over time from bids to bids to bid. I see a lot of organizations not do this, get excited and pursue opportunities that, you know, later on, closer to deadline, they have to pull out for, or they submit against because of the whole sunk cost piece. They think, well, you know, we've spent so much time and effort putting this together, we're as well submitting it now, even though by that stage they know they're very unlikely or even, you know, almost impossible for them to win. So it is worth having a process, refining it, having that structure, and then like using that as a sort of feedback to kind of go back to and check, see how it's working and make adjustments to it. Okay, so that's a really important point. So get that process in place. If anyone's interested, if you want to punch in, if anyone wants, I've given them out before, but we do have like a go no go matrix, a little template you can use. So if anyone wants to punch into the chat, or you can email us afterwards, if you would like me to share that template with you, I'm very happy to do so. Not a problem at all. So just punch in the chat, let me know that you'd like one, we'll get around to organising that. Lots of people want the template, no problem, guys. We're here to add value. We're here to add value. Speaking of add value, I think I'm going to stop talking. Alistair, what are we thinking? There's quite a lot of questions around the kind of environmental / sustainability type piece. So the question I've got on the screen relating to this topic was, how do SMEs answer questions on sustainability and environmental points well? Again, you know, in comparison to how like larger organizations are going to do that. Any thoughts on that one, please? Don't know if you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. There are a number of.
I thought you were leaving me hanging there, Alistair. I thought you were leaving me. I was like, that's not what we agreed.
Lasted 19 minutes. No, you can approach this from many different ways. First of all, I would say consider becoming accredited. ISO 14001 is a great metric, which we'll get into, but consider wrapping yourself in some formal accreditations that just evidence a minimum standard of compliance in decarbonisation, environmental protection. Take action on your own premises, okay? If you've got offices, consider an energy audit. You know, I've seen people install air source heat pumps, solar panels, even sensors on lights, anything that you can show has a positive impact on decarbonisation. Consider your internal systems as well. You know, we look at things like just-in-time delivery systems. Now that might not be the best for decarbonisation, but I've seen companies with route planning software. Okay, so if you're hitting a lot of jobs a day, if you've got lots of places to go, find out the most carbon effective route to take, and you know, consider using that. Fleet vehicles is a big one. Okay, Euro 6 compliant vehicles, electric vehicles, these are all things that can bolster your credibility again with regards to sustainability and environmental protection. Now, we're talking about making things real, so evidence steps that you have taken to date to tackle this issue. Okay, what training are you delivering? Have you previously delivered contracts with environmentally related KPIs? How did you manage? What KPI attainment rate did you get? So we're looking at things like diversion of materials from landfill, recycling, all these sorts of things. Find out the buyer's specific preferences through research and see how you can directly align your approach with known client priorities. I feel like I pad at this point every time we do a webinar, but it's the foundations. It's the basic point. Find out the buyer's preferences and see how you can align with these. So we've said ISO 14001 is a great metric. Have a look at that. Again, it's just a pre-qualification aspect that shows we are doing X, Y, and Z without you having to then go and demonstrate each of these points to the buyer. You can just, show them your ISO 14001. Another element that is gaining a bit more traction as well is carbon reduction plans. Okay, these are coming into prominence. These are currently being used on public sector opportunities that are worth over £5 million per year. Okay, but Andrew and I'm going to implicate Andrew in this. We both think this is going to trend down in the future. I think we might see this at covering opportunities that are as low as 1 million per year, and then potentially, my opinion is that these are going to at some point encapsulate all public sector bidders. I believe that at some point in the not too distant future, we may all need carbon reduction plans. Now, even if you don't need one right now, even if you're bidding in for public sector works that are worth less than £5 million a year, it's an option to explore if you maybe want to get in front of this process. Now, they're not cheap, okay? They're depending on the size and scale of your company. They're a few grand, 4 or 5 grand, but they're yours. They become yours. You can also do them yourselves as well. The Crown Commercial Services do excellent webinars on this. They're leading the vanguard in regards to carbon reduction plans. So you could do all these yourself for free. If you paid a consultancy practice to do it, you'd be looking down the barrel of 4 or 5 grand, depending on the size and scale of your company. The point of getting in front of this process when you don't need to is that's added value, okay? And that's such a good look in public sector procurement. If you can demonstrate something that you don't actually need, but it helps you and it helps the buyer, big tick, extra marks, okay? This is really the crux of public sector procurement, is added value. How can I give a bit back? Doing more than you're being asked to is how you pop your head and shoulders above these other bidders. Okay, it's impressive having something that you don't need, but it helps the process. So yeah, I've got a piece here on the Crown Commercial Services. They do excellent webinars. It's all free. You should come away from them. I had to sit through it twice just to get it in my head, but you should come away being able to have a stab at carbon reduction plans. Even if you don't decide to go down the CRP route, carbon reduction plan CRP, it's a real eye-opener as to how your company is responsible for emissions. It transcends your vans, it transcends your light switches in your offices. It's your scope 3 supply chain emissions that it blows my mind how there'll be some companies with big premises and lots of vehicles, but there'll be some companies operating as managing agents, and your scope 3 supply chain emissions, it's a real eye-opener to see the impact that you are having, even though you maybe don't realize it, whether this be upstream, downstream emissions. If nothing else, it's a really good educational piece on where this damage is coming from and how we can fix it. Okay, so from understanding this, you can see how and where you can make carbon savings. And then I think just a final point on this, educate your teams and your supply chain, okay, on decarbonisation and environmental protection. Educate them on your internal policies and approach, but give them a bit more, relevant sector specific information. Help them make the changes that we all need to make. So by delivering formal training on decarbonisation and energy savings, you can then mention this within your tender responses. Okay, it's also a great social value piece. It's quite a you can monetize it quite well on social value. So if you have a look at the TOMs, you'll see what I mean. But the proxy values and the way that it's calculated, it's low-hanging fruit in my opinion, because it's easy to deliver. But you could hit 10 people in a online, Zoom call, Teams call. You could hit 20 people, and then the social value monetary rate that you get is per attendee. So if you knock 10 of these out with 10 attendees, you're making quite a big social value difference as well. But coming back to the environmental aspect, as a company policy to train and educate your teams and supply chains, it's very impressive to see. So I think these are the little steps that we can start making. Now, there's so much more on this topic, but I knocked this response out this morning. So if you've got any further questions, just send them through and I'll get back to you via email. Any specifics that you'd like to know more on, I'll certainly respond to any of your questions on that.
Thank you, Alistair. Lovely. There's been some live. The only other thing I would say, the carbon reduction plan. Yeah, I mean, the idea with them is that I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of them being, probably the amounts over time could easily drop down in terms of contract values that they're mandated for. They were designed so that organisations would be able to produce them in-house. And Alistair mentioned that there are obviously organisations that can support with them externally if you don't have the resource or capability to do it. If you need that and it's something that's pressing you're looking at, then you can get in contact with us. We are able to arrange that for you for carbon reduction plans, for a review of all the stuff around carbon accounting that you need to get into place. So if you do need that support, then you can get in contact with us, but obviously it's a paid for service. But if you do need it and you want to discuss that, then do let us know and we can organise. There was just a follow-on point, or a kind of a response in terms of some of the comments we made about social value. A couple more social value comments came in, so just to talk about those. So regarding social value, the key point is that SMEs do not have the excess of time and profits to play with that the corporate sector do. We deliver social value by being embedded in our local communities and by existing staff involvement in the voluntary sector. We do not have the spare time or cash to add social values to our activities. The industry seems to be completely ignoring this. And I totally get where you're coming from and sort of the difficult position you find yourselves in. The reality for people that aren't as aware is that a lot of the social value evaluation of your offering is very specific on what are you going to do in relation to if you are awarded this contract, because otherwise the risk is if you're able to talk about the social values activities that you do as a business, as an organization anyway, you can refer to those activities across 10 different tenders and count them 10 different times. So that's why there's this big push to say, what are you going to do in terms of the social value that's going to be explicitly delivered as a result of you being awarded the contract. So that's why it's sort of more and more structured down that type of road. But I do understand the problem that it poses for sort of SMEs in terms of sometimes, well, we really don't have any excess to play with. What I would say is that there's a few different ways to look at this that might help. One of the things is, well, there's a couple of different things. It depends on the nature of how the social values going to be assessed, but you can look at what essentially will give you the most kind of bang for your buck in terms of the social value offering that you make. What I mean by this is you can think about, well, what will give us allow us to claim the highest monetary social value commitment, with the biggest gap between the commitment that we can claim and the actual cost to the organisation of doing that. So if we're thinking about what can we do, so if we just donate money to charity, then the money we donate is the money that's counted. So that's like a direct proportion. So there's no gap there. Whereas we might say we can give away some of our services that are usually billed out at X rate, but actually the cost to us would be like the staff rates that are that those staff internally that we pay them, but that might be a very big gap. Like, it's not uncommon for there to be for example, you might bill people out actually double what it costs you to have them in a seat. So obviously that's a bigger gap. There might be things that have an even bigger gap that you can claim. For example, if you're a service provider, so you provide, I don't know, software or something like that, you can give subscriptions away that actually the incremental cost to you of giving that subscription away is very, very small, but the price of it, the value that you can claim is much, much higher. So, you could say, well, this is worth £5,000, but actually the cost to you of giving that software away to, say, a charity or something might be almost zero, but you can claim it as a £5,000 worth of value that you're giving to that charity. If it's things about people's time in organisations, if it's time that would otherwise be, not directly billable, not utilised, then perhaps there's, a gap there where you could argue that it's not costing you as much. You have to make a judgment within a tender as well about, well, what proportion is the social value piece worth versus, for example, what is the overall pricing worth? So I totally get the point around, well, we don't have any profits, but actually the way that the overall tender is being evaluated, would it make more sense to put our overall price up a little bit to give us a little bit of headroom to build in more social value offerings? So your social value offering that's going to have a direct cost to the business has to be considered as that overall margin calculation. So you might have to strategically decide to go, actually, well, we need to put our overall price for this work up a little bit to give us that headroom to actually build in some social value. So we're scoring across that bit that's, in a really substantial piece of the overall evaluation. So you might need to sort of play with it and rejig it and so on. But I do take the point. I know it's a difficult position, but just to say that there are maybe ways to think about it tactically, if not strategically, doing things like that might help a little bit in terms of what you're going to do. Not up on the screen, but I just noticed another question. It says, are sponsorships a valid form of social value? Could it be used as evidence? Yeah, so again, you have to be careful in terms of, is it asking you to say what you do specific related to the delivery of a contract? And if you're saying, we will do this commitment, this sponsorship is directly related to us winning this contract, that's fine. And so you're not doing that sort of double counting thing, but absolutely sponsorship's a valid form of social value for things like, as you put there, Paralympic athletes, for sure. Okay. Let's see what else. There's a lot more sort of questions and stuff that have started coming in. Let's see what else we can have a look at. So the first question, Alistair, any thoughts on this one? We spend many hours submitting a response, then getting no feedback, no follow-up, no award notice, and sometimes no way to request if the tender is removed or closed in a portal. That's very frustrating, and it's not unheard of that does happen. It shouldn't be happening to you regularly, but it does sometimes happen. Any thoughts, Alistair? Do you want me to take that one? Are you happy? You got any ideas? It's left me hanging this time for sure.
Might need you to step in on this one. It's a reality of the industry. It happens. It shouldn't happen. I mean,
yeah, and there's not a set answer. Obviously, if we're talking about, if you're putting in proposals within the private sector, then you don't have a lot of, or any recourse really. If it's public sector bids that you've submitted, then they are obligated to give you the outcome of it, and they are obligated to publish an awards notice and to tell you what's happened and why. The level of feedback you get can vary, but certainly if you've gone through a formal tender process, they are obligated to give you some feedback against that, to tell you what the outcome was and how you scored relative to the winning bid. I would say obviously you'll have from any activity, you'd have the information through the portal. You'll also have on the contract notice, when you put in the initial to find and then to work on the initial bid, from that contract notice, there will be a contact from the organisation, and really you should be able to, as a last resort, you contact them directly and understand. If you don't get anything from them, if after you've put in a submission and you're being told nothing, I think it's reasonable just to find other people in the organisation to contact and go, please, can you tell me about the status of this procurement activity? Who's the best person to speak to, and continue to pursue it. If they tell you you're not successful but won't give you any feedback, I would continue to pursue them until they do say, we would really like it. Organisations a lot of people in the public sector, they do know that it's helpful for them to actually give the feedback to the suppliers, because then they've got an opportunity to improve their offering for the next time around. So it is in their interest, if they can have that short-term pain of finding the time to do it, it is in their interest to actually put that information back across and to give them that feedback. So that's the sort of default position we want them to take. But obviously, in reality, we get some rogue actors who don't give us that information, which is very frustrating. So I would politely but persistently pursue. If you're not getting anywhere, the portal's closed, I would refer back to the contact notice, see the contact on it there is. If there's not a given person, I would be looking for contacts across the organisation and to see who can find you that information. If you put in a formal response, they should be able to tell you what your score was, what the winning score was, and the relative gaps between your score and the highest score across the answers that you submitted. Sometimes it's very, very summary, very brief, but the idea of spending, as the questions asked, weeks putting in submissions and then just getting nothing back, not even knowing if it's been awarded yet, anything like that. I mean, that's completely unfair on you as a supplier. So I would continue to pursue against that, politely pursue through the portal. If that doesn't work, through the contact and the contract notice. If that doesn't work, more broadly, looking up or going on the website, looking up contacts across the organisation to try and understand what's happening with it. So don't let it lie, because it's not fair. You need that opportunity to understand where you are, to get the closure, and to give yourself the opportunity to improve into the future as well. Okay, let's move on. There's, I think, a few more questions have come in as well. Question number 5. How would you research into buyer preference? Any website or hints or tips? Any thoughts, Alistair, on this one regarding how do you get insight into what the buyers are really looking for?
Yeah, public sector clients typically do have pretty good information on their strategic aims, their aspirations. So if it's a local authority, if it's a council, get on the website. They should have a procurement policy which spans 4 years. They should have a bit of a, the last couple I've dealt with specific to councils in England, they've had a year in review or how we're doing, where they talk about their own KPI success, how they would like to drive the organisation through, and certainly some of their priorities in which to do this. Now, there was a massive, I can't remember them all, but there was a 5-point kind of building back better after COVID. These are great pillars to focus on. So it's economic prosperity, it's stemming and keeping ourselves protected against COVID. I should know these. I'll circulate them to you if you email, but these are pretty good places to start, because they are, they're pretty aligned throughout most local authorities. But certainly just get on the website. It's a really good place to start for social value as well. In a previous job, I was bidding into South Ayrshire Council. Their website's fab. They've got local groups who we support, or local groups who we deem as being worthy of support. That's your social value response. They've signposted it to you. So it's just looking through their procurement strategy, strategic aims, ambitions, a year in review, all the rest of it, how we're doing, where we'd like to be, seeing where you can slot into that, and beating the drum about that on your tender response. I've had a recent tender that I've written for a local authority. It was a housing association, and their average customer satisfaction rates are about 70%. Now, the client that I was working with, their average customer satisfaction rates are 92%. So bang, there's a space that you can fill. There's a void that you can get yourself into and say, listen, work with us, contract with us, and we will bring our pizzazz, our proactive customer service journey, whatever language you want to use, and we will try and help us both raise our customer satisfaction results. So it's just probably go straight to the source, get onto the local authority, the NHS trust, whoever it might be, the government body, get onto their website and just have a play about, see what jumps out at you as being an issue that they're encountering, but also an issue that your company and your service solution design can help. Okay, so find things that you do better than them and then apply that to your bid writing.
Awesome. Thank you, Alistair. There's a few different bits and pieces that have come in. Just is actually nice. I know it's too big a group to sort of have people chatting away, which is a shame. But like some of the questions and comments coming in are building on the questions that were asked, our responses, which is kind of how we want it to go. So a couple of different things. One person's kind of come back on just a little bit more around about the social value and the difficulty. I think it's probably quite a specific kind of niche conversation, so I'll probably try and reach out in the coming days after the webinar, if that's okay, and dive in with that particular attendee a little bit further. One of the other things that came in was talking about to supplement around the idea where we get nothing back from the buyer, even though we put in our bid. It was about using the idea of submitting anonymous freedom of information requests around procurement outcomes. So yeah, you can do that. You can do it, if you've got a particular email or something, you can do that anonymously. If you don't do it anonymously, obviously it's kind of identified as who you are, but you can do it essentially through an email. So it would be done kind of anonymously, and authorities are obligated to consider and where appropriate respond to freedom of information requests. So if you really do get stumped and you're getting nowhere after having tried these kind of multiple routes, you can go down the route of trying freedom of information as well. So that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Thank you for raising that point as well. Okay, a couple of different things that have come up just to dive into as well. There's a question that came in around about this. Variations of this question come up quite frequently, where it's a global company that's just set up an arm in the UK. We have experience in other countries. Does this apply? Can we use this or reference this when we're applying for UK submissions? The reality is, yes, generally, as a general rule, you can. What you can do is state clearly that you're part of, for example, if it's a parent company and you're relying on either the standing or the expertise or the capabilities of the parent company to be able to perform the work, then that's absolutely fine. You're able to reference that. So again, whether or not how compelling that is, it depends on the nature of the work, how you're going to, that expertise from the other regions, the other countries is going to be transferred into the UK, how that stuff's all going to work and interplay. That's all going to be part of the judgment as to whether you're a great fit for the work. But you can certainly reference that. It shouldn't be like an out and out, just absolute blocker for you from participating. So I would say that you definitely can to try and meet those requirements as well. Okay.
Could I just add a piece on that?
Of course you can, Alistair. Yeah, please.
I think just to build on what Andrew said, all evidence is admissible and all evidence is great to use. I work on the basis of a bit of a hierarchy of evidence. So just try and keep that at the forefront of your mind, that if you've worked for the same client before, that is the highest standard of evidence that you can provide. If you've worked in the same sector before for different clients, so let's think, not this housing association, but these other 5, then let's, that's pretty close second. But then if you have people in your business who have this experience, even though your company doesn't, that's admissible as well. Okay, so consider that. And then we had a great question a couple of months ago about the use of evidence. So, can we use Glassdoor reviews? Can we use Trusted Trader reviews? Yes, absolutely. It's all on, it's all game. But just consider, this is the cynic in me, but just consider, is a buyer going to be thinking, okay, well, could you go on and write that about yourself? Or could you get your friend to write that for you? So the higher standard of evidence for that sort of testimonial is going to be a client testimonial, where we can say, we dealt with practice, Andrew Watson was the contract manager, this is what Andrew's got to say. And then you give them Andrew's email address. They can call Andrew. Can I just clarify, you work for the estates team at this housing association. What was Alistair like to work with? So just keep at the forefront of your mind, maybe just a little bit of cynicism, that if it's possible for you to go and give yourself a review, just think, is the buyer going to, you know, come to that conclusion? So there's a hierarchy. Now, you know, previous deliverables in different countries are great, very, very high standard, absolutely. A higher standard would be, you know, local to the area. So just keep it in your mind that all evidence is game, it's all on. Some evidence is better than others.
Thanks for that, Alistair. That's really helpful. I suppose a couple of, as we come towards the sort of last, into the last sort of quarter of the webinar, a couple of different things to touch upon. I'll touch upon this in the very last slide, but there were obviously lots of questions that came in relating to, you know, how to make sure I'm getting full visibility of all the tenders that are out there. So at the moment, the best way to have full market coverage of public sector opportunities within the UK is to have a service that captures and properly categorizes them and pushes them out to you. We do one of those. There are a couple of other legitimate companies that do like similar but not as good as systems that do that, and I'll provide a little bit more information at the end without turning it into a sales pitch, but I'll provide you a link in case anyone's interested in a full access free trial, anything like that. But really, if you do want to be able to find tenders exhaustively in an easy to follow, categorized ways, the way to do that really is to have a subscription service. And like I say, there are a couple of different organizations that do that. There are ways to try and find a lot of tenders without having a paid for subscription, but it's going to take more time, more effort, and run the risk of missing one. So generally, the way to find it is to have a high quality subscription service. And I will send the link. I will provide a link and a little bit of chat about that at the very, very end of the webinar. Alistair, can I give you this one to have a think about while I just run through a few more specific points? Are there any specific negatives to avoid? Some things which are instant no. Can I leave you to ruminate on that one for a couple of minutes while I go through a couple of other points?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so there were a lot of questions or comments really on, you know, people talk about what's the magic, what's the secret sauce, what's the key to unlocking this, what are the things, the tips and the tricks and the things that I can be doing as an SME to make sure that I am as successful as possible when I'm putting tenders together. There's no magic, I'm afraid. There's you know, the classic combination of inspiration and perspiration. So really what you have to be thinking about is, we do this, we talk a lot about this in the training. We do training courses a lot, and it's about trying to think about the overview, think about things strategically, and understand all of the different components that go into putting together great submissions. And actually, if you think about some of the question topics that we've had are kind of like that, they're kind of alluding to that. So there's been questions around about how do we pre-engage? How do we understand what's important to the buyer? How do we do buyer research? How do we do really well in terms of our social value scores? So, you know, you need to be thinking about your tender as the output of that is the sum of a lot of different parts. So there's a lot of different pieces that have to go into the drafting of the answers that will get high scores. The more you're willing to just put in like okay or middling or quite good answers, the less structured and the less different parts of a strategy and a process that you've got to follow. If you are wanting to do things really, really well, you need to think a bit more structured and spend a bit more time in the sort of planning phase of putting together responses rather than just in the writing phase. So we need to be thinking about making sure we've got a good process for choosing the right opportunities, thinking about what is our strategy for tackling this tender. What are we going to do in terms of our solution design? How does that then relate to what we should do for our pricing and what it should look like? What are the themes that we want to be emphasizing across our response? What are the things that are really important to this buyer that we want to be responding to across our response? what is it that the evaluation criteria is actually asking for? How do we address the high scoring evaluation criteria across our response? How have we evaluated and analysed all of the specifications, all of the requirements within our tender, and have we chosen the correct places to respond to them? I'm going to say it one more time, across our whole response. So again, like I'm saying, it's not magic, but the more we think about the big picture, keeping that sort of helicopter view of our tender and go, okay, this is all of the work that I'm going to put in across it beforehand, before actually starting to draft, and then going in to understand, actually I need to plan out my individual answers and structure those, and then and only then am I actually going to start drafting content. That's the sort of process that you should be thinking about undertaking if you want to get those really high scores. Okay, if you just decide to skip bits, every bit you skip is just going to take away one of the pieces of the score that you can attain. We've done a lot of this stuff, but we've not really done that much buyer research. We're gonna lose 5 or 10% of the marks. We've done this really well, but we've not gathered enough evidence to support the claims that we're making. We'll lose another 10% of the marks. These answers are really good, but what we haven't done is actually go line by line through all of the requirements, all of the specifications that have been listed by this buyer to make sure we're addressing those all across our responses. Another 5 or 10% of our potential score gone. So you can skip out some of these parts and still put together a compliant response that will score okay, but you skip out these type of parts and it's going to put a cap on the overall score that you can make. That's like 3 days worth of bid training condensed into 5 minutes, so it probably felt a bit much, but that's the reality. So there's no tips and tricks. There are things that you can do in the short term. Structure your answers properly, make sure they're written against the evaluation criteria, what's the definition of the top score, things like that. But to do that more sort of structured stuff, you need to spend a bit of time learning and practicing and applying those tools and techniques to make sure you give yourself the best possible opportunity to score as highly as possible. SMEs typically more often don't have dedicated bid resources, therefore they more often skip out on some of these steps. So they're more often in an SME, it's someone writing a response alongside other BAU activities, whereas more often in a large organization, there might be a set person or set people who are actually responsible for putting bid responses together. They're going to be an advantage. If we don't equip ourselves for BAU, we don't give ourselves the time and the opportunity to put those responses together of a really high standard. Really simply, effort in, results out. Okay, so give yourself the time and space. You're much better off doing a smaller number of tenders to a really high standard, putting in the effort, putting in the time, rather than doing a really large amount, very kind of half baked, half biscuit type approach. So it's just really important to keep that in mind. I don't know if I've maybe trod on your toes, anything you were going to say, Alistair, but in terms of the specific things to avoid or instant no's, did you come up with any?
Yeah, let's spin through these. I would say on a kind of basic level, non-compliance with the tender specification. There'll be minimum turnover requirements. These can be worked around, okay, but minimum required accreditations generally can't. You see it in dom care quite a lot where you typically need to be CQC rated. They won't award you the work if you're not, okay. Now it's specific works. There are some works that you can take on without a CQC rating, but this tends to represent the basic minimum compliance. If you're not there, the next steps you need to take is to get that rating, okay? Now, like we've said, some caveats to this, your trading history, they like to see, 2-3 years audited accounts. If you can't provide these can be worked around, okay? They are looking to facilitate SME involvement, including startups, and including the example of, maybe an international company who's looking to penetrate the UK market. You might not have a footprint here, that can be worked around. Another good example is insurance policies. If you have the insurance policies, they need to be at the level requested. However, they don't need to be in place at the time of submitting the bid. There needs to be a promise that they will be in place for contract commencement. Okay, so now that's a protection against SMEs going out and spending a lot of money on an insurance policy and then not winning the works. Okay, so there just needs to be a firm commitment that they will be in place. So there's caveats, but compliance is the first step that you need to be looking for before you're looking at competitiveness. Second point, I had a really insightful conversation with a guy about 6 months ago. Assuming the client knows your company and your solution design. Now this guy, he was pretty self-aware, and he said that, yeah, he wrote his bids with an arrogance, with an assumption that buyers know who we are. Maybe they do, but we've spoken before on webinars about the transparency rules, the regulations around public sector procurement. It's not your company that's being evaluated, it's your bid. Okay, so even if you are a blue chip tier 1 contractor, as this guy was, he was a big hitter, his bid didn't cover the information that buyers needed to see. Now, buyers could Google it, they could probably read previous tender responses, or they just read the news. It was just a serious company, it wasn't in the bid, so he didn't get the marks, and that's the end of it. So he learned a lesson, I learned a lesson, but it's, don't go into it with an arrogance or an assumption. I also try and just write like I'm writing for people, okay? So I suppose point 3 I've got written here, avoid an overuse of technical jargon, okay? Sometimes you'll need to use it. IT contracts, they go straight in with, you know, coding languages and things, and you need to match that. But an over-reliance on technical jargon or acronyms, especially if these aren't explained, just turns people off. I write for a living. I read every day, and sometimes I just need to put something down. If it's just code and hieroglyphics and letters after letters, I need to put it down. Now, what if I was a public sector buyer? They just put it down, and you know, they've lost interest in you. Consider as well when they're reading your bid that they are thinking, what are these guys going to be like to contract with? What's this company going to be like to work with? Now, if they've just thrown in technical jargon, is that what their emails are going to be like? Am I going to understand what's going on? So keep the person at the heart of your considerations as well. And final point, I'll spin through this. I see we've got 3 minutes. Not answering the questions being asked, okay? And this is a nice segue into, there's already a question on it, but boilerplate responses, template responses, how much of our previous information from bids can be replicated? The answer to that is only as much as is relevant, okay? If you ramble through a response without answering the question, buyers will award you very few or no marks, and they'll just move on. They're ruthless. We've seen this, some of the questions already. They're a ruthless bunch. So here we see the benefits of creating bespoke, personalized tender responses aimed directly at the client, the location of the works, and the tender specific evaluation criteria, okay? Some look for innovation, others added value, some look for evidence, capacity, capability. So probably the biggest no-no, the 2 biggest no-nos is lack of compliance and not answering the questions that have been asked of you, in my humble opinion.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Very nice. Couldn't agree more. Okay, guys, conscious of time, just to sort of round things up. If anyone's looking for a bit more of a conversation around the specifics that they're faced with, specific challenges, what can be done to help, there's a bit of a sounding board, and just an extra pair, an extra person to have a conversation with from who's seen these on lots of different occasions. Do let us know. We're really happy to do that. If you need any help, I know a lot of the folk on the call today are Tenders Direct subscribers. If you need any help relating to the system usage, please don't sit waiting and wondering about how to use any aspect of it. Do get in touch with your account manager and they can sort you out. But the 30-minute consultation on any bid related topic is open to anyone that's attended this webinar. Just get in touch with us and we will organise that for you. We've spun through a lot of good stuff in terms of how to bid better. We get much more time and space and discussion in our actual training courses, okay? So if you go onto our website, you can see the training courses. We've got an introductory one, an intermediate one, an advanced one, and relevant for quite a lot of the chat that we've had on the webinar to date, there's a specific course relating to how to do social value bidding as well. So there's a course for every level. We can offer some discounts and things like that if you're looking to put multiple people or a person through multiple courses. So do get in touch with us if you're just looking to book a course as a standalone piece, do it on the website. But if you'd like to discuss some offers around that, or if you can do multiple ones, then do just get in touch with us as well. I talked just now about in response to the requirement to have a good placed system to find and categorize and send to you all the relevant tenders. Our one is Tenders Direct. You can sign up, go onto the website and sign up for a full access free 7-day trial, which is a great thing to do to give you an understanding of your market size, what opportunities are there, and you can use it as a reference to see and compare, is this flagging more opportunities more simply than I'm used to seeing? Is it worth me having a subscription in place to do that into the future going forward? And most of the time it probably will be, but you can get a free no obligation access to the platform to do that. In terms of contacting us to carry on the conversation, there's my telephone number there, and our email is bidsupport@tendersdirect.co.uk as well. Please do feel free to reach out. We love to have conversations and chat. There were a few questions on asking about, can you support us across individual bids? Yes, of course we can. I just didn't want this, didn't want the webinar to turn into a sales pitch. But if you do want to discuss consulting or things like bespoke training for your group in your in-house or support on that critical tender, then please do get in touch. We can do this. We will try and send out follow-up emails to everyone that's attended the webinar, just to give you the opportunity to provide any feedback you like. I think we've done reasonably well, apart from running 1 minute over. I'm sorry if we didn't get to the questions that you asked. There were too many to get through all of them. Again, do feel free to follow up with us directly if you want to carry on the conversation or you're keen to have a specific question asked. We will try and get round people in the coming days and weeks as well to just check in with you and make sure you're happy with what you got out of the webinar and that nothing's left unanswered for you. It's been a real pleasure. There's been a really big crowd on the webinar today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and nearly everyone stuck with us throughout the the now 62 minutes. So I really do appreciate your time and attention. Thank you ever so much for joining us and sticking with us. We'll hope to see you at the next one. So it's bye from me.
And bye from me as well. Yeah, enjoy your day, everybody. Thanks for attending and for your interest.
Thank you. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you at the next one in August. Bye for now. Thanks, guys.